It thawed
I
finally?
was able to take it off. I mean, I was able to get the tanks.
Today we're going to talk about RVing in the cold. We jumped right into it and learned quite a bit that we'd like to share, and we'd love to hear what you have to share about what your experiences are in the cold. Every RV is different. I'll share what's worked for us and some things we've heard from other people. We'll talk about things you want to do before you get to your site, things you want to do when you get to your site, and things you want to do after you get to your site as sort of maintenance on an ongoing basis. So probably the first and most concerning thing when you talk about cold weather RVing is water. A lot of people have the opportunity to buy heated tank pads that they can put on their tanks, and they can actually leave them connected to power when they're driving down the road and keep their tanks from thawing. We have an enclosed underbelly, and I know our tanks are in there somewhere, but I really don't know where. So for us, that wasn't an option. So when we drove up here, we found out very quickly that the drive itself is where you have to start thinking about the water. So for us, probably would have been a good idea to drain the water tanks before we drove up here. Maybe put some antifreeze in there so that things that didn't freeze up. The downside of that is you don't have water that you can use to drink as you're traveling. But the upside is you don't have to wait a couple of days for everything to thaw out and put little electric heaters everywhere in order to get everything flowing again. So number one for us, once we got here, was the heated electric hose. Some people take heat tape and they wrap a regular hose and they put insulation around it. It's a lot of work, and the heated hose, depending on your budget, you may not consider it that expensive. You have to keep it plugged in all the time, obviously. And we actually put extra insulation around the heated hose where it meets the trailer. And then I wrap that with black tape. And that makes sure that any little tiny leaks here don't leave big icicles coming down the side of the trailer. That ice can expand when it gets really cold, and it can start messing with the seal where the hose meets the trailer. So since we don't have tank heaters, I have an alternative method for keeping things warm down there. We bought a 1500 watt ceramic heater from Amazon, and I put it inside a big Rubbermaid box. I point it towards the back of the box, and it forces a channel of warm air to come flowing around and out of the box. I can then point that at the fresh water drains, or a gray valve, or a length of pipe, sewer pipe that might be exposed outside of the underbelly, and in the course of 15 to 30 minutes I can thaw pretty much anything under there, even when it gets down into single digits or slightly negative 5 or 10 degrees below. It works really well for us. I kind of wish we could do two, but we can only support one with our outdoor electric plug here. So if you do put a heater underneath your trailer, it's very important to remember that there's water running down the trailer. You've got your pipes down there for draining your sewer. You've got your water pipe, your fresh water pipes. You've got snow on the ground that will run under the trailer. You want to make sure you get one that is made for the outdoors, and you want to make sure you plug it into a GFI outlet so that if the cord gets wet, the heater gets wet, it basically pops that little trip, and you don't have to worry about any electrical damage or fire damage. So another thing that makes a substantial difference in keeping your trailer warm is skirting. If air is flowing underneath the RV freely, you'll have that cold air constantly blowing against your underbelly or whatever you have underneath your trailer, and it'll keep it a lot colder. If you can keep that air still and maybe put in a small heater like we have, you can actually keep it pretty warm under there, and that's that much less work your furnace has to do, and it's that much more likely that everything's not going to freeze up on you. So we bought an old billboard and a snap kit, and it worked really well for us. One of the things that we find is the bottom of the skirt sometimes gets frozen into the ice, and if you leave in winter, you're going to leave that behind. You have to take a knife and cut it off. They'll get it in the spring. It'll come around. So for us, having a $50 billboard recycled billboard that we used, actually is a good way to go because we don't have to worry too much about what gets frozen onto the ground. So come on back here, let's take a look. One of the things I did was I made sure to park the trailer with enough room to shovel snow here so that we could walk back and drain the sewer tanks or get to the electrical or the hose or anything else that you need to, because you're going to be back here. It's going to happen a lot. So let's talk about the cords first. One of the things that I do is once a day, you come by, I just move my electrical cord, I move my heated hose, I move my sewer pipe so that they don't get frozen down into the ice, because then I'll be spending hours chipping them out in the spring. So for the gray water and the black water, I basically leave the hose disconnected. What I'll do is maybe I'll move my heater with the box back and I will defrost a valve or a section of pipe that may be exposed, and then I will dump first the black, then the gray, just like you always do on an RV. But as soon as I'm done draining it, I actually take the hose and I put a plug on the end and I lift it all the way up and get all the water out of it. What I found is that if the water stays inside that sewer pipe, it can freeze and the sewer pipe cannot handle the stress of that. And so it could potentially burst when you try to move it again if there's frozen water inside, even just, a little ½ inch on the bottom of the pipe. Now with this cap on, I just leave it like this. That way I don't have to worry about it snowing on top of the sewer cap here. And I can just leave that in all the time. This is good to go whenever I need it. I also get to keep it up out of the snow so that I have less to worry about it freezing or anything like that. When it comes to winter RVing, RV parks tend to provide a lot of services to keep things from freezing up. Sometimes you'll see the water spigot will have heat tape around it. Where we're staying, there's actually a whole little house built right around the water pipes, and we connect to the back there. This light on top actually lets you know that there is heat in there, because that means there's electricity, which means their heat tape is working and you're good to go. Now you have to check with the individual RV parks and make sure that you're allowed to plug anything that you want to in here outside of the traditional 30 or 50 amp outlet. So there is another outlet here, but if you plug something in and then you blow that GFI or you trip the fuse, you're responsible for any damage to the pipes that occurs in here. So make sure you check with the RV park and what their policy is and what you're allowed to do when you plug something in. So one of the things that we have to be really careful of is ice accumulating on the sides of the slide and the sides of the trailer. I typically come out every day or so with a shovel and knock it all off. I also clear off any ice dams that may be forming up at the ceiling where the ceiling meets the wall, because what happens in cold weather is as the snow melts on top of the heated trailer, water trickles down and then it freezes and you get a dam of ice that builds up. And that could actually have water flow all the way back into your vents. That could have repercussions when that water freezes. It might pull things apart. So I always go around the edge of the trailer with a shovel and I knock everything off. One of the other things you look for is on the slides, you want to make sure that you're getting the icicles that come down the slides off. These cables, when we go to close, obviously need to be free and able to operate. So at a certain point, I'm going to have to get out a hammer and chip this one away. Most of the other ones I've already got free, so it's not a problem. But that is something to keep an eye on. Now, some people will actually climb up on their roof and shovel all the snow off on a regular basis. I think if you have really good insulation on your roof, the snow is going to pile up and you might want to do that. If you have a lighter grade trailer, you might find that just the heat from inside the trailer flowing through the roof will actually keep the snow melting and keep it from piling up on top. But you do want to be careful about those ice dams along the gutters. One thing that we found to be really helpful when you first park your RV is to put wooden blocks under the feet of the jack. As all the ice and snow melts and runs underneath your trailer and then freezes again, you may be leaving with just 2 inches of solid ice underneath your trailer, and You don't want your jacks frozen down into that. So we put wooden blocks underneath because worst case, we can leave the blocks and somebody will pick them up in the spring. So you can see here we have about 2 inches of ice, and there's a block there and a block there. We'll probably get this block back in the spring, but I'm not so sure about that one. So I met an RV repairman who'd been doing it for about 30 years, and he gave me a great piece of advice about the refrigerator. The refrigerant inside, when it gets down to 0 degrees, -5, -10, can actually gel, and that gel, when it flows through your pump is going to burn out very quickly, and so it can get pretty expensive. And he said, people put light bulbs in here, workman lights, little tiny heaters, but he said all you really have to do is put foil tape over a couple of the bottom vents on your refrigerator. And that keeps enough of the heat from the compressor engine inside so that nothing ends up getting too cold and gelling up and causing you problems. So let's talk for a minute about snow shovels. This is the cheap one you find in front of the grocery store. It does not have any metal, no metal edges, no blades. I really like it because then I can knock snow off the trailer, I can scrape ice off the windshield with it. It's a giant ice scraper and it's really light, so I can actually just sweep snow 2, 3, 4 inches of powder right off the driveway like this. Now, something else about shoveling snow, particularly this really light powder in these deep snow environments, is that the piles on the side of your driveway are going to get really high. And if you come straight into the snow, when you go to throw that snow up there, it's just going to come cascading straight back down. So what I like to do is I sweep it all over to the edge, and then I come at it sideways. And you can see you get a nice clean edge when you come at it sideways, and keep all of that snow from falling down in your driveway, then melting and creating slick spots. And probably the most important thing about that snow shovel is get two so that you can put other people to work.